My head felt like someone had used it as a drum set, and the sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains made me want to crawl under the covers forever. But the covers weren't mine, the room wasn't mine, and the warm body next to me definitely wasn't my boyfriend Callum's. Harper's arm was draped across my waist, her dark hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink. We were both still in yesterday's clothes, thank God, but that didn't make this any less of a disaster. The smell of tequila and regret hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I carefully extracted myself from Harper's embrace, my heart pounding as memories of the night before came flooding back. The velvet vine had been packed, the drinks had been strong, and Harper had been more flirtatious than usual. When she suggested we crash at her place instead of me trying to get home to Callum, it had seemed innocent enough. We'd been best friends since college. What could go wrong? Everything, apparently. My phone buzzed with a text from Callum. "Morning, babe. Hope you had fun with Harper. Coffee's ready when you get home." The guilt hit me like a freight train. Nothing had happened. I was pretty sure nothing had happened, but waking up in another person's bed while in a committed relationship felt like betrayal regardless. I grabbed my purse and shoes, tiptoeing toward the door, when Harper's voice stopped me. "Leaving without saying goodbye?" Her voice was husky with sleep and something else I didn't want to identify. "I need to get home to Callum," I whispered, not turning around. We were just drunk, Harper." "Were we?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. Instead, I slipped out of her loft and called an Uber, my hands shaking as I typed in my home address. The 20-minute ride gave me time to craft my story. Harper and I had gotten drunk, I'd crashed on her couch, and I'd woken up early to come home. Simple, clean, believable. Callum trusted me. He'd never had a reason not to. This would blow over, and life would go back to normal. I found Callum in our kitchen, methodically making breakfast like he did every Sunday morning. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, fresh orange juice. Everything perfectly arranged, just like his IT security job had trained him to be. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual as I dropped my purse by the door. "Sorry I'm so late. Harper and I really overdid it last night." Callum looked up from the stove, his grey eyes studying my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "I figured. You look rough." "Thanks for the ego boost," I laughed, but it sounded forced even to my own ears. "I'm going to shower." "Volara." His voice stopped me at the hallway entrance. "Where exactly did you sleep last night?" The question was simple, direct, and loaded with implications I wasn't ready to handle. My first instinct was to deflect, to make him feel bad for asking. "Why would you ask me that? Do you think I'm lying to you?" "I'm just asking where you slept." "On Harper's couch, obviously." "God, Callum, you're being so dramatic about this. We've been friends for 10 years. You've never had a problem with me staying over before." But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't entirely true. I had a vague memory of Harper pulling me toward her bedroom, of collapsing onto her bed fully clothed, of her arms around me as we fell asleep. The couch story was easier, cleaner, less complicated. Callum nodded slowly, but something in his expression had shifted. The trust that usually lived in his eyes had been replaced by something cooler, more analytical. He was processing information, filing it away like he did with security threats at work. "Okay," he said simply. "Breakfast is ready." We ate in relative silence, the only sounds the clink of forks against plates and the distant hum of traffic outside our apartment. I kept waiting for more questions, more accusations, but they never came. Somehow, Callum's silence was worse than anger would have been. After breakfast, I retreated to our bedroom to change clothes and try to piece together exactly what had happened the night before. The memories were frustratingly fragmented. Harper buying round after round of tequila shots, her hand on my thigh during our conversation, the way she'd looked at me when she suggested I stay over. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper. "Hope you got home okay. Last night was fun. We should do it again soon. I deleted the message immediately, then felt paranoid about having deleted it. What if Callum asked to see my phone? What if he noticed the gap in my text history? Volara? Callum's voice came from the living room. Can you come here for a minute? My stomach dropped. He was sitting on our couch with his laptop open, his expression unreadable. This was it. He'd found something, figured something out, put the pieces together with that methodical brain of his. What's up? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. I need to show you something. He turned his laptop toward me, and my blood turned to ice water. On the screen was a message request on Instagram from Ray Mendoza, Harper's girlfriend. The preview text was short but devastating. Hi, Callum. I think we need to talk. Can you explain why Volara's name is visible in Harper's bed in this morning's selfie? Attached was a photo that made my world tilt sideways. Harper, looking perfectly tousled and beautiful, taking a mirror selfie in her bedroom. And there, clearly visible on the pillow behind her, was the distinctive silver nameplate necklace Callum had given me for my birthday, the one that spelled out Volara in elegant script. The necklace I'd been wearing last night, the necklace that was now sitting on Harper's nightstand, forgotten in my rush to leave. I started, but no words came. My carefully constructed story crumbled like a house of cards. Callum's voice was deadly calm. You said you slept on the couch. I did. I must have taken my necklace off and left it somewhere. You know how I am when I'm drunk. I lose things all the time. But we both knew that wasn't true. I was obsessive about that necklace, never took it off except to shower. And the photo clearly showed it on the pillow, not randomly dropped somewhere. Volara. Callum closed the laptop with a soft click. I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to tell me the truth. What happened last night? The moment stretched between us like a tightrope. I could tell him the truth, that I'd slept in Harper's bed, that there had been moments of intimacy I wasn't ready to examine, that I'd woken up in her arms feeling things I'd never felt before, or I could double down on my story and hope he'd let it go. I chose the path that felt safest in the moment, the one that would protect my carefully constructed life. Nothing happened, Callum. You're being paranoid and dramatic, and honestly, it's insulting. I've never given you a reason not to trust me. If you want to turn this into some kind of interrogation based on a stupid photo, then maybe we have bigger problems than where I slept last night. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I couldn't take them back. Callum's face went completely blank, and he set his laptop aside with the careful precision he used when diffusing particularly volatile situations at work. You're right, he said quietly. Maybe we do have bigger problems. He stood up and walked to our bedroom, leaving me alone on the couch with the weight of my lies and the growing certainty that I'd just made everything infinitely worse. Monday morning at the medical office felt like walking through a minefield. Every conversation seemed to stop when I entered a room. Every glance felt loaded with meaning. I tried to focus on patient charts and appointment scheduling, but my mind kept circling back to the disaster that was my weekend. Callum had been polite but distant since our conversation yesterday. He'd slept on the couch without explanation, made his own coffee this morning, and left for work without our usual goodbye kiss. The silence was eating me alive, but I couldn't figure out how to break it without making things worse. Rough weekend? Asked Jenny, one of the nurses, as she dropped a stack of files on my desk. Just tired, I replied, forcing a smile. You know how it is. But Jenny's expression suggested she knew more than she was letting on. The medical office was a gossip mill on the best of days, and I had a sinking feeling that somehow word of my situation had already started to spread. My phone buzzed with a text from my younger brother, Ellis. Mum's been calling me all morning asking about you and Callum. What's going on? I stared at the message in confusion. How could my mother possibly know anything was wrong? Unless... Another text came in, this one from Harper. We need to talk. Ray is losing her mind. My hand started shaking as I realized the scope of what I was dealing with. Ray hadn't just sent that photo to Callum, she'd probably sent it to everyone she could think of. My mother, my brother, mutual friends, maybe even people at work. I excused myself to the bathroom and called Harper immediately. Thank God, she answered on the first ring. Volara, we have a serious problem. What did Ray do? She sent that photo to half of our mutual contacts. She thinks we're having an affair, and she's trying to blow up both of our relationships. I've been getting calls and texts all morning. My knees went weak, and I leaned against the bathroom wall for support. What did you tell people? The truth, that we were drunk and you crashed here, but the photo makes it look like... Harper's voice trailed off. Like what? Like we slept together, which we didn't, right? The question hung in the air like an accusation, because the truth was, I wasn't entirely sure what had happened. The memories were fuzzy, fragmented by tequila and emotion. I remembered Harper's arms around me, the way her breath felt against my neck, the moment when friendship had blurred into something else entirely. Right, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Volara, I need you to be sure about this, because if Ray keeps pushing this narrative, it's going to destroy both of our lives. Nothing happened, I said more firmly. We were drunk, we fell asleep, end of story. People can think whatever they want, we know the truth. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it myself. I hung up and immediately called my brother. Ellis, what exactly did Mom say? She got a call from Mrs. Henderson. You remember her from church? Apparently, her daughter saw some photo on social media and told her mum that you were cheating on Callum. Mum's freaking out about the family reputation. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. Mrs. Henderson's daughter was friends with Ray on Instagram. Of course. It's not true, Ellis. Harper and I are friends. We got drunk, I stayed over, and now people are making up stories. I believe you, Ellis said immediately. But you know how Mom gets about appearances. She wants you to call her. The last thing I needed was a lecture from my mother about proper behavior and family shame. I'd deal with that later, after I figured out how to salvage my relationship with Callum. Back at my desk, I tried to focus on work, but the whispers and sideways glances were impossible to ignore. During my lunch break, I drove to the coffee shop near Callum's office, hoping to catch him and explain everything properly. Instead, I found Ray Mendoza sitting at a corner table, her camera equipment spread out around her like she was working on a photography project. She looked up when I walked in, and her expression could have frozen fire. Well, if it isn't the woman of the hour, she said loudly enough for half the coffee shop to hear. Ray, we need to talk. Oh, now you want to talk? Funny how that works. She stood up, her 5-foot frame radiating more anger than should have been physically possible. You want to explain to me why my girlfriend's bed smells like your perfume? Or why she's been acting weird all morning? Nothing happened between Harper and me. We're friends, we got drunk, and I stayed over. That's it. On her bed, in her arms, wearing the necklace your boyfriend gave you. Ray stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I'm not stupid, Volara. I know what I saw. You saw 2 friends who had too much to drink. You're reading into something that isn't there. Am I? Ray pulled out her phone and showed me another photo. This one taken from her bedroom doorway, showing Harper and me asleep in bed together. Harper's arm was around my waist, my face was pressed against her shoulder, and we looked like anything but platonic friends. My heart stopped. Where did you get this? I took it when I got home from my shift at the coffee shop. I wanted to surprise Harper with breakfast in bed, but instead I found her with you. Ray's voice broke slightly. Do you have any idea how that felt? The guilt hit me like a physical blow. Whatever had or hadn't happened between Harper and me, we'd hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Ray had been nothing but kind to me over the years, and now I was destroying her relationship. Ray, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, and now I have to decide what to do about it. She gathered her camera equipment with sharp, angry movements. Harper thinks I should just let it go, pretend I never saw anything, but I can't do that. I won't be made a fool of. What do you want from me? I want you to tell the truth to everyone, your boyfriend, your family, your friends. Stop pretending this was innocent when we both know it wasn't. She left without another word, leaving me alone in the coffee shop with the weight of my choices and the growing certainty that my carefully controlled life was spiraling completely out of my hands. When I got home that evening, Callum was sitting at our kitchen table with his laptop open and a stack of papers beside him. He looked up when I walked in, and his expression was unreadable. "How was work?" he asked politely, like we were strangers making small talk. "Fine. Callum, we need to talk about yesterday. I think I handled things badly. Did you?" He closed his laptop and gave me his full attention. "How so?" "I got defensive when I should have just explained what happened. The truth is, Harper and I did end up in her bed, but only because we were too drunk to think clearly. Nothing romantic or sexual happened. We just fell asleep." Callum nodded slowly. "Okay, thank you for clarifying that." His calm acceptance should have been a relief, but something about his tone made me nervous. He was too controlled, too measured. This was how he acted at work when he was dealing with a security breach, methodical, patient, gathering information before making his move. "Are we okay?" I asked. "I think so, but I do have one question." "What? Can I see your phone?" The request was simple, reasonable, and completely terrifying. My text history with Harper was full of messages that could be interpreted as flirtatious. There were photos from last night that I'd forgotten about, inside jokes that might look like evidence of an affair to someone looking for it. "Why do you need to see my phone?" "I don't need to, I'm asking if I can." The distinction felt important, loaded with meaning I didn't want to explore. If I said no, it would look like I had something to hide. If I said yes, he might find things that would make the situation worse. "Callum, this feels like you don't trust me." "Maybe I don't," he said quietly. "Maybe that's something we need to work on." The honesty in his voice was devastating. I'd spent so much energy trying to control the narrative that I'd forgotten about the person I was supposed to love most. Callum wasn't my enemy, he was my partner, and I'd been treating him like an obstacle to overcome. "Okay," I said, reaching for my phone. "You can look." But as I handed it over, I realized I'd made a crucial mistake, because the first thing he'd see when he opened my messages was a text from Harper that had come in while I was driving home. "Ray showed me the second photo. We need to get our stories straight before this gets worse." Callum read the message and his face went completely still. When he looked up at me, I saw something die in his eyes, the last remnant of trust that had been holding our relationship together. "Get your stories straight," he repeated slowly. Interesting choice of words. I opened my mouth to explain, but no words came. Because how do you explain that kind of message without admitting you'd been lying all along? The family dinner at my parents' house that Sunday was supposed to be a normal monthly gathering. Instead, it felt like walking into a courtroom where I'd already been found guilty. My mother, Therese, greeted me at the door with the kind of smile that could cut glass. "Volara, dear, how nice that you could join us. And Callum, you look tired. Are you getting enough sleep?" The pointed question wasn't subtle, but then again, my mother had never been known for her subtlety. She'd clearly heard the rumors and had already formed her opinions about my character and choices. "I'm fine, Mrs. Prynne," Callum replied politely. "Thank you for having me." My father, Edwin, emerged from his study long enough to shake Callum's hand and mutter something about the weather before disappearing again. Conflict avoidance was his specialty, and he could probably sense the tension from 3 rooms away. Ellis was already in the kitchen, helping with dinner preparations and shooting me sympathetic looks. At 24, my younger brother still believed the best of everyone, especially me. It was both comforting and heartbreaking. So, my mother said as we gathered around the dinner table, I've been hearing some interesting stories about you lately, Volara. Mom, Ellis warned, but she held up a hand to silence him. I think we should address the elephant in the room, don't you? Mrs. Henderson called me yesterday with some very concerning information about your behavior. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. What Mrs. Henderson thinks she knows about my life is none of her business. When it reflects on this family's reputation, it becomes my business, my mother shot back. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to hear from a neighbor that my daughter was seen in compromising situations? Nothing compromising happened, I said through gritted teeth. Harper and I are friends. We had too much to drink, and I stayed at her place. End of story. In her bed, my mother said coldly, with another woman's girlfriend, while you have a perfectly good man sitting right here who deserves better than this kind of treatment. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Callum sat perfectly still beside me, his expression unreadable, but I could feel the tension radiating from his body. Therese, he said quietly, I appreciate your concern, but this is between Volara and me. Is it? My mother's voice rose slightly. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're being publicly humiliated while she runs around town with her college friend, acting like a teenager instead of a grown woman in a committed relationship. Mum, stop, I said, my voice shaking with anger and embarrassment. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Then explain to me why Mrs. Henderson's daughter has photos of you sleeping in another woman's bed. Explain to me why people at church are asking me if you and Callum are having problems. Explain to me why I had to hear about my own daughter's behavior from a neighbor instead of from you. The shame was overwhelming, but underneath it was a growing anger at being treated like a child. I was 30 years old, and my mother was lecturing me like I was 16 and had missed curfew. Maybe, I said carefully, the problem isn't my behavior. Maybe the problem is that people in this town have nothing better to do than gossip about things they don't understand. My mother's face went white with fury. How dare you turn this around on me? How dare you act like you're the victim here when you're the one who chose to embarrass this family? I didn't choose anything, I exploded. I got drunk with a friend and made some bad decisions, but I didn't choose to have my private life dissected by a bunch of bored housewives. Volara, Ellis said softly, maybe we should all just calm down. But it was too late. The dam had burst, and years of resentment came pouring out. You know what, Mum? I'm tired of living my life according to what Mrs. Henderson and her church friends think is appropriate. I'm tired of being judged for every choice I make, every mistake I make, every moment of my life that doesn't fit into your perfect little suburban fantasy. If you're so unhappy with our values, my mother said icily, perhaps you should consider whether you belong in this family at all. The words hit like a physical blow. Even Ellis gasped, and my father chose that moment to emerge from his study, clearly sensing that things had escalated beyond his comfort zone. What's going on out here? He asked weakly. Your daughter, my mother said without taking her eyes off me, is explaining to us why her reputation doesn't matter, why this family's reputation doesn't matter, and why we should all just accept whatever behavior she chooses to engage in. That's not what I said, I protested, but my voice was shaking now. Callum cleared his throat softly. Maybe I should go, he said. This seems like a family discussion. No, my mother said firmly. You should stay. You should hear this. Because someone needs to tell you that you deserve better than a woman who doesn't respect you enough to maintain basic boundaries with her friends. The room went silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I felt exposed, raw, like every secret and insecurity had been laid bare for examination. Callum, I said quietly, can we please just go home? He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Not anger, not disappointment, but something worse, pity. Actually, he said slowly, I think your mother has a point. I think we all need to be honest about what's been happening. My blood turned to ice water. What do you mean? I mean, Callum said, his voice deadly calm. that I've been doing some thinking since yesterday, and I've realized that there are things about your behavior that I've been ignoring for a while now." "What things?" Ellis asked, his loyalty to me warring with his confusion about the situation. Callum pulled out his phone and set it on the table. "Things like the fact that Volara has been deleting text messages. Things like the fact that she's been coming home later and later on weekends. Things like the fact that when I ask simple questions about her activities, she gets defensive and accuses me of being controlling." "Callum, don't," I whispered, but he continued. "And things like the fact that when I asked to see her phone yesterday, she refused. When someone you're supposed to trust asks for transparency, and your first instinct is to refuse, that tells you something important about the state of your relationship." My mother leaned forward, her expression shifting from anger to something like vindication. "What kind of messages was she deleting?" "Mum, please," I begged, but Callum was already answering. "Messages from Harper that could be interpreted as inappropriate for someone in a committed relationship. Messages about meeting up, about missing each other, about things they did together that I wasn't told about." The betrayal was complete. Callum wasn't just sharing our private business with my family. He was building a case against me, using evidence I didn't even know he'd gathered. "You went through my phone?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I didn't have to. You left it unlocked on the kitchen counter yesterday morning, and I saw the notifications. I didn't read your messages, Volara, but I saw enough to know that there's more to this story than you've been telling me." Ellis looked between us with growing understanding and disappointment. "Volara, is this true?" I wanted to deny it, to explain that the messages weren't what they seemed, that Harper and I were just close friends who sometimes communicated in ways that might look inappropriate to outsiders. But the words wouldn't come, because the truth was, I had been deleting messages. I had been coming home late. I had been defensive when Callum asked questions, and I had refused to show him my phone because I knew what he'd find there. "I think," my mother said quietly, "that you owe Callum an apology, and you owe this family an explanation." But I couldn't speak. The weight of my choices, the consequences of my lies, the reality of what I'd done to the people who loved me. It was all too much. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I need some air." I walked out of the dining room, through the living room, and onto the front porch, where I collapsed onto the swing my father had installed when I was a child. The cool evening air felt like a blessing against my burning cheeks. A few minutes later, Ellis joined me, settling onto the swing without a word. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the distant sounds of traffic and neighborhood life. "Are you okay?" he asked finally. "No," I said honestly. "I'm really not." "Do you want to talk about what's really going on?" I looked at my younger brother, the one person in my family who had always believed in me, always supported me, always seen the best in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. "I think I might have ruined everything," I whispered. Ellis reached over and took my hand. "It's going to be okay, Volara. Whatever happened, whatever you did or didn't do, it's going to be okay." But as I sat there on my childhood porch, listening to the muffled voices of my family discussing my failures inside, I wasn't sure that was true anymore. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally came on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after the photo incident. I was at Harper's loft, ostensibly to clear the air and figure out how to handle the ongoing fallout from Ray's social media campaign. But really, I was there because I couldn't stay away. The truth I'd been avoiding, the reality I'd been denying, was that my feelings for Harper had crossed every line I'd drawn for myself. What had started as friendship had become something deeper, more complicated, more dangerous than I'd ever intended. "Ray moved out yesterday," Harper said, pouring herself a glass of wine with shaking hands. "She took most of her stuff while I was at work, left a note saying she couldn't be with someone who didn't respect their relationship enough to maintain boundaries." "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. "This is all my fault." "Is it?" Harper turned to face me, her dark eyes searching mine. Because I keep thinking about that night, Volara, and I remember things that maybe we should talk about. My heart started racing. What kind of things? I remember you telling me that you'd been feeling disconnected from Callum for months. I remember you saying that you wondered what it would be like to be with someone who really understood you. I remember you kissing me. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Because she was right, I had kissed her. In my tequila-soaked state, I'd leaned over and pressed my lips to hers, and she'd kissed me back with a passion that had terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. We were drunk, I said weakly. Were we? Or were we finally being honest about something we'd both been feeling for a long time? I couldn't answer because the truth was too complicated, too frightening, too destructive to everything I'd built my life around. Harper, we can't do this. I'm with Callum. You were with Ray. We're friends, and we need to find a way to go back to being just friends. What if I don't want to go back? Harper stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. What if I've been in love with you since college, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise? The confession hit me like a physical blow, because part of me, a part I'd been trying to ignore, felt the same way. You can't say things like that, I said, backing toward the door. It's not fair. What's not fair is spending 10 years pretending I don't feel what I feel. What's not fair is watching you with him when I know you're not happy. What's not fair is losing Ray because I couldn't stop myself from wanting you. Harper, please. I love you, Volara. I've always loved you, and I think you love me too. The words I'd been avoiding, the truth I'd been running from, the reality that would destroy everything I'd worked to build, it was all there in the space between us. And God help me, she was right. I can't, I whispered. I can't do this to Callum. I can't blow up my entire life for something that might not even work. Might not work? Harper's voice was filled with hurt and disbelief. Volara, we've been each other's person for 10 years. We know each other better than anyone else in the world. How could it not work? Because relationships aren't just about knowing someone. They're about compatibility and timing and practical things like building a life together. Callum and I have a home, shared finances, plans for the future. We have stability. Do you love him? The question was simple, direct, and impossible to answer honestly. It's not that simple. It is that simple. Do you love him the way you love me? I closed my eyes, trying to find the strength to lie convincingly. But I couldn't, because the truth was that what I felt for Harper was electric, consuming, transformative, in a way that my relationship with Callum had never been. That doesn't matter, I said finally. Love isn't enough. There are other people to consider, other consequences to think about. Like what? Like my family, who are already questioning my judgment. Like our friends, who are taking sides. Like my job, where people are already gossiping about my personal life. Like the fact that I don't even know if I'm attracted to women in general, or just you specifically. Harper flinched at the last comment, and I immediately regretted it. I didn't mean that the way it sounded. Yes, you did. You meant that being with me would be an experiment, a phase, something you could try out and discard if it didn't work out perfectly. That's not true. Isn't it? Because it sounds like you're looking for reasons to stay in a relationship that doesn't make you happy, rather than taking a chance on something that might. We stared at each other across her living room, the weight of 10 years of friendship and 3 weeks of chaos hanging between us like a bridge neither of us was brave enough to cross. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I glanced down to see Callum's name on the screen. Where are you? We need to talk. The simple message sent a chill down my spine. Callum never demanded to know where I was, never insisted on immediate conversations. Something had happened. I have to go, I said, grabbing my purse. Volara, we're not done talking about this. Yes, we are. We have to be. I left Harper standing in her living room, looking beautiful and heartbroken, and everything I wanted, but couldn't let myself have. The drive home felt like traveling toward my own execution. Callum was waiting for me in our living room, his laptop open on the coffee table and a manila envelope beside it. "Sit down," he said quietly. "Callum, before you say anything, I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen." "Sit down, Volara." His voice had a finality to it that made my knees weak. I sat on the edge of our couch, as far from him as possible, and waited for whatever bomb he was about to drop. "I've been doing some research," he said, turning his laptop toward me. "About infidelity, about trust, about what happens when relationships break down irreparably." On the screen was a legal website, specifically a page about divorce proceedings and asset protection. "Callum, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've spent 3 weeks trying to convince myself that this was all a misunderstanding, that we could work through it, that you were telling me the truth about what happened with Harper." He opened the manila envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. "But then I hired a private investigator." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You what?" "I hired someone to look into your activities over the past few months. And what they found was enlightening." He spread the papers across the coffee table, like evidence in a court case. Photos of Harper and me at restaurants, at bars, at her apartment building. Phone records showing calls and texts at all hours. Credit card statements showing charges I couldn't explain. "This is from last month," he said, pointing to a photo of Harper and me having lunch. "You told me you were working late that day, and this one is from 6 weeks ago, when you said you were having dinner with your mother." Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of our relationship. I'd been living a double life without even realizing it, prioritizing my relationship with Harper over my commitment to Callum, lying by omission if not outright. "Callum, I can explain." "Can you? Because I've been trying to understand this for weeks, and the only explanation that makes sense is that you've been having an emotional affair with Harper for months, and it became physical that night you stayed at her place. It's not that simple." "Then explain it to me. Make me understand how the woman I've been planning to propose to has been lying to me for months about where she goes, who she sees, and what she does with her time." The words "planning to propose" hit me like a sledgehammer. In all my confusion and guilt and desire for Harper, I'd forgotten that Callum and I had been building toward a future together. He'd been thinking about marriage while I'd been falling in love with someone else. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry, Callum." "Are you in love with her?" The question I'd been avoiding, the truth that would end everything, hung in the air between us. "Yes," I said finally. "I think I am." Callum nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting that answer. "Then we're done," he said simply. "I've already spoken to a lawyer about protecting our shared assets. I've started the process of removing you from our lease and our joint accounts. I need you to pack your things and find somewhere else to stay." "Callum, please. Can't we talk about this? Can't we try to work through it?" "Work through what? The fact that you're in love with someone else? The fact that you've been lying to me for months? The fact that you chose her over me every single day without having the courage to tell me?" He was right, and we both knew it. There was no coming back from this level of betrayal, no way to rebuild trust that had been so thoroughly destroyed. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore," he said, but his voice was sad rather than angry. "You made your choice, Volara. Now you have to live with the consequences." As I sat there looking at the evidence of my double life spread across our coffee table, I realized that in trying to have everything, I'd lost everything instead. The turning point had come, just as I'd feared it would, and I was completely, utterly alone. The law offices of Barlow, Finch and Keller were everything I'd expected from a high-end legal firm. Marble floors, mahogany furniture, and an atmosphere of quiet intimidation that made my palms sweat before I'd even signed in at the reception desk. I'd been served with official papers 3 days after my conversation with Callum, legal documents that made our separation official and outlined exactly how our shared life would be dismantled. The language was cold, clinical, and devastating in its thoroughness. "Ms. Prynne?" A woman in an expensive suit approached me in the waiting area. "I'm Rebecca Finch. Thank you for coming in today." I followed her down a hallway lined with law degrees and professional accolades, my heels clicking against the marble like a countdown to my own destruction. The conference room was spacious and intimidating, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city I'd called home for the past 5 years. Callum was already seated at the long table, flanked by another attorney, and looking more composed than I'd ever seen him. "Please have a seat," Ms. Finch said, gesturing to the chair across from Callum. "We have quite a bit to cover today." I sat down carefully, hyper-aware of every movement, every breath, every heartbeat that seemed to echo in the silent room. "Before we begin," Ms. Finch said, opening a thick file folder, "I want to make sure you understand the purpose of today's meeting. Mr. Dorsey has initiated proceedings to dissolve your domestic partnership and separate your shared assets. This is not a mediation. This is a formal notification of his intentions and an opportunity for you to understand your legal position." "I understand," I said, though I really didn't. The legal jargon felt like a foreign language, and the gravity of the situation was only just beginning to sink in. "Good. Let's start with the apartment." Ms. Finch pulled out a stack of documents. "The lease is in both of your names, but Mr. Dorsey has been the primary financial contributor to rent and utilities for the past 2 years. He's requesting that you voluntarily remove yourself from the lease agreement." "Where am I supposed to live?" "That's not our concern," Callum's attorney interjected. "Our client has offered to give you 30 days to find alternative housing, which is more generous than the law requires." I looked across the table at Callum, searching his face for any sign of the man who had loved me, who had been planning to propose, who had made me coffee every morning for 3 years. But his expression was blank, professional, like I was a stranger he was conducting business with. "What about our joint accounts?" I asked. Ms. Finch consulted her notes. "Mr. Dorsey has already initiated the process of separating your finances. You'll retain access to your individual checking account, but the shared savings account, the joint credit cards, and the investment portfolio will be divided according to contribution percentages." She slid the financial breakdown across the table, and the numbers erased my illusions. Callum paid most of our life. My savings barely covered a deposit and 2 months' rent. The lawyer explained that without marriage, I was owed nothing. Then came the inventory. Furniture, appliances, memories reduced to line items. I asked Callum if this was really what he wanted. He said he wanted honesty, and I'd chosen Harper long before I was caught. He revealed the investigator's file, then the final blow. Harper's written confession. My double life collapsed into evidence, deadlines, and silence. Thursday morning, the clinic parking lot became my courtroom. Dr. Morrison pulled me aside. Patients were transferring, phones were exploding, and a viral post showed me in bed with Harper under the caption, "Would you trust her?" In one swipe, my reputation collapsed. She called it indefinite leave, but the letter demanded my keycard and desk cleared today. Back at the motel, Ray texted that Callum was promoted for handling me professionally. Then Ellis arrived with a suitcase and Mom's check, help, plus exile. By nightfall, Harper left voicemail. She was leaving town too, and I realized I had nothing left.